Fill her up.
You're listening to the Gas Digital Network.
We need to roll back the state. We spy on all of our own citizens. Our prisons are flooded with nonviolent drug offenders. If you want to know who America's next enemy is, look at who we're funding right now. Every single one of these problems are a result of government being way too big.
You're listening to Part of the Problem on the Gas Digital Network. Here's your host, Dave Smith.
Hello, welcome one and all. This is a brand new episode of Part of the Problem. I am your host, the most consistent motherfucker you know, the Jewish Jaguar, Dave Smith. I'm joined, as always, by the king of the caulks, the fire, Robbie Bernstein. How are you, sir?
Just here to get my caulk on.
Here to get your caulk on, don't you always? Oof, I am in pain in this episode. I'm playing through some fucking pain. Fucked my shoulder up. Going to the doctor tomorrow. Lauren was like, just go to the hospital last night. Because I was just like, fucking telling me. She's like, just go to the emergency room. I think you messed it up. I think something's bad. You need to go. And I'm just like, no, I refused. Oh, the emergency room, such a fucking nightmare.
When was the last time you were in the emergency room?
I went to the emergency room not too long ago because Lauren burned herself.
Ooh.
She got like a nasty burn on her hand cooking. It was like a few weeks after we had the baby. She, we're all sleep deprived and crazy, and she was cooking and fucking burned herself like that. Something, I think some asparagus caught on fire or something.
Not even worth burning yourself over.
Yeah, no, it wasn't anything. It wasn't like she burned herself on a sandwich.
Yeah.
She just burned herself on some asparagus, but it was a pretty bad burn. It ended up not being that bad, but it looked real bad at first to me, to my untrained eye. And so I was like, yeah, I'm taking you.
Not your hand
room.
Job hand.
Yeah.
We're going right away.
No, thank God it was the non-dominant hand. I wasn't in trouble the whole time, but that'd have been like, divorce papers. No, but
Until you go to the hospital, you show up at a lawyer's office.
Yeah. Oh, is this not the hospital? Well, while we're here. No, but I was, and also she didn't want to go, but I insisted we go because I was what I wanted. I was like, maybe we'll go to what do you call it? Those emergency care.
Those are great.
But it was late at night and they were all closed. So I was like, well, fuck it. We got to have a doctor take a look at that. And they still fucking charge you an arm and a leg. Even when you have insurance, you still fucking pay it was $1,500 or some shit like that. But anyway, we went. We had to go. But so that was the last time I was there. And you sit there next to a few crackheads and wait for fucking 3 hours. It's a goddamn nightmare. But they gave her some stuff, some cream and some shit to help with the fucking pain. So it was kind of worth it. But for me, I feel like I probably need to have an X-ray or an MRI or whatever the fuck they do to look at your shoulder. And that's, I don't know. I think ultimately I'm going to need like physical therapy or hopefully not surgery. So it's not like anything is going to be a quick fix anyway. So fuck it. I got a doctor's appointment tomorrow. Anyway, I am in quite a bit of pain. I apologize if you're watching. I'm going to be fucking adjusting every few seconds. But, try to play through it. Try to find a comfortable position here and play through the pain. Anyway, how's everything with you?
I don't have these kind of complaints, so pretty
man,
good.
I really feel like a fucking old man, as the Jews would call a fetch.
Yeah, it comes out as you get older. You turn into you can go a whole long lot of life trying not to be a Jew, and you turn around at some point, you're like, my knees.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
And what's weird is you still have the young man's mentality when something like fucking hurts, and you're like, oh well, it'll go away because that's the natural order of things. They heal.
That is
you know what I mean? This is literally what I thought about my shoulder 3 years ago. It's been a nagging thing now for 3 years. And I'm an idiot. I should have gone and fucking gotten it checked out at the beginning. Probably would have been a lot easier. But I just kind of let it go. And now I'm in a lot of pain. But yeah, it's been fucking literally going on for years. And I fucked it up. I don't know what I did.
You jerked off too much. It happens to the best of us.
Jerked off too much. Or maybe I should have jerked off more before the shoulder went bad. I missed my prime jerking off years. I was out there.
Gotta warm up,
living
Dave.
Living life.
You gotta stretch.
Jerking off's for amateurs. Fucking your wife. That's where it's at. You hear that, kids? Anyway, all right. So there is some stuff to talk about this week. One of the things that I've had a lot of people ask me about, and so I figured I would address up front, seeing as how we did spend a lot of time, a couple episodes, talking about the Milo appearance on Legion of Skanks. We talked about it before it happened. And the whole shitstorm that came along with it, with a bunch of people online who got their panties up in a bunch because they can't handle somebody with views that are different than theirs. And they especially can't handle someone like Milo, who has views that are different than theirs and makes them look like idiots, and has people laughing at them. I think that's a big part of it. But anyway, so it's been announced, me, Lewis, and Jay all tweeted about this separately, that tonight will be the last episode of Legion of Skanks at the Creek in the Cave. We have, we're parting ways with the Creek. And we're going to be moving on. They're going to be moving on. We'll all hopefully all do very well still. But yeah, it's kind of sad. It's like, you know, it's the end of an era of a little period in time for us. And this has been this is what my career in comedy and podcasting and all this stuff has always been. Me and you have had many talks about this, how it's always kind of one phase into the next. One thing ends, another thing begins. It's always a little bit sad at the end of each thing because you kind of look back at the run. I mean, I remember in my comedy career where there were just these like we had. I first started stand-up comedy really at Stand Up New York, which is this club on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, and that was like the booker there was managing Patrice O'Neill. And the booker, Wayne Rada at the time, was managing Patrice O'Neill and Big Jay Okerson, and then started managing me and Lewis, and we were like the young guys on his roster. And he managed like Rich Voss and Bonnie McFarlane and a bunch of Keith Robinson, a bunch of like, you know, some really talented comedians. And it was this amazing, so it was kind of like our playground. Like we would get, you know, he would give me and Lewis like all the like late night spots there, and like kind of like for a new comic, it was just like all you could ask for. You were like hanging around with all the best comics in the city and getting up and figuring out how to be a comedian. And it was amazing. It was like my first year and a half in comedy. I look back at that with some real fond times, and the whole staff were shitheads, and we'd all get hammered and just party and just, you know, have a lot of fun. And Wayne got fired ultimately. I think Wayne was stealing money from the club the whole time, but hey, we didn't care. But he got fired, and I remember just at that point just being like, oh, this is it. This is so devastating. Like that's fucking, it's all over now, man. Like this was our home, and you know, that ended, and then other, you know, there'd always be another period and another period and another period. And in fact, you know, the people know all about, there was like the Eastville period of the CB's Comedy Club. Anyway, this all just keeps kind of happening over and over. And in my podcasting days, you know, it's like we had Part of the Problem had their run at Stand Up Labs, and then we came over to Gas Digital. We had the period at Ralph's house, then the studio opens. You know, there's just all these kind of phases, and one ends and the other one begins. And with the TV stuff, I was like, you know, doing Kennedy show regularly, and then I got the contract for SE Cup show and had to leave that, and that was kind of sad that I couldn't do Kennedy anymore. And then there was the fucking Unfiltered run, and then that show got moved, and you know, they fired everybody, or didn't renew our contracts at least. And you know, then now back at Kennedy. It's like there's always just one phase, and it is always a little bit sad when one ends, because you kind of look back at the good times you had there, and it's like, that's over. But I've kind of learned in my life, and maybe there's something that's of a metaphor that other people could think about just in life in general, is that it's always, you gotta kind of embrace the change. You got to embrace change in life, because it's happening whether you like it or not. So you might as well. You can resist it or you can embrace it. And at least in my experience so far, there's always been the next thing that comes in that's kind of a fun new chapter. And I'm very certain that that will be the case for Legion of Skanks. I think the next chapter will be a lot of fun. But look, we had some really fucking great memories at the Creek in the Cave, and we built the show at the Creek in the Cave. I mean, we had a show before we went there, but we didn't have listeners. And that's a pretty big, I've learned, a important feature in a podcast. Otherwise, you're pretty much just a man rambling into a microphone. But anyway, so tonight we're going to go there. We're going to have a little party. We're going to have a lot of fun. We got some good guests coming on, and it'll be a good time.
Also, the gritty, you guys, because I remember when you did a live to no one.
What?
I'm like when you guys were in the upstairs room in the creek.
Well, this is okay.
You
So
guys
you're
didn't give a
talking
shit.
about when
You
we
were
first started at the creek.
I go as far back as when you guys were at the stand, because I used to do open mics on Sunday, and come 8 p.m. I had enough, and I'd plop my ass in the back row and watch you guys over at the stand.
Yeah, that's funny.
That goes way back.
That's right. So this is before we went to so we used to do the show out of Lewis's apartment. And then we started doing it live at the Stand Comedy Club when the Stand was a brand new club. And it was just a shit show.
Yeah.
They just weren't really prepared for having a podcast. At that time, we had problems where
you guys
the
almost
episodes
beat up
didn't
20
go out.
Jews once. I remember that one.
There was one famous time when, not our finest moment, but me and Jay charged a crowd of Jews who fucking came in and were fucking heckling. Those little Jews deserved it. They almost got what they had coming.
The glory years were the back room years in the creek.
Those were some fun fucking times, man.
Because I wasn't smoking weed then. It was a pot sauna. There was no not smoking weed. You showed up to a bunker, and that was like that was a party night. Every time.
That was where Legion of Skanks really started making its, earning its bones. And it was where the show blew up. I mean, I remember like it was a really thrilling thing when the show all of a sudden kind of caught fire. And none of us had any success before that show. And that'll be true for the rest of our lives. Whatever any of us end up doing. We had no fans before we started doing that podcast, Legion of Skanks. No one. Jay had 1,200 Twitter followers at the time. Nobody fucking... Jay was an established comedian. He worked the clubs. And Jay was like a guy who, if you knew comedy... Like, if you went to the fucking comedy clubs or you were in the comedy scene, you knew who Jay was, but the world didn't know who Jay was. Like, nobody knew of him. But if you knew, you were like, oh, this is like the funniest motherfucker who's just doing the funniest shit you've ever seen every single night at these comedy clubs. But nobody, but I used to fucking go on the road with Jay at this time, and I'm telling you, it's like he didn't sell any tickets. When I say literally no tickets. I mean, I don't like the club sold some tickets, but there were not people there. If we went to a show and there was like 2 people who were there for Jay, it was like, oh, these 2 people came for you, man. That's pretty cool. Like nobody came, and it's awesome. Now fucking all of us are filling up our shows. Now it's like everybody goes, and everybody in a crowd when we go do a gig will be there for us, and it's fucking great. And I remember in those back rooms, like the thrilling times when like when the show, because we started and no one listened to the show. And then, even the days you're talking about at the Stand, maybe a few hundred people were listening to the show. And we put out a really funny product and it just started growing kind of organically. And then there were moments. It was like when Jay got on Rogan or when I got on Rogan or when other people would do other shows. And then it would, Jay did Bert Kreischer's podcast. I remember we got a big bump from that. But I remember when the numbers started going up and you were like, oh shit, there's 10,000 people listening to the show right now. Like that is so fucking thrilling. When you've never had fucking people listening to your thing before and you're like, there's 10,000 people listening to us fucking bullshit right now. And then it would be like, there's 20,000, there's 30,000, there's 40,000 and on and on. I mean, and it was always very exciting. And a lot of that happened at the Creek. So it was, fond memories. And I will say, I love Rebecca. I really do. I love her and she's always been good to us. She's been good to me personally, outside of stuff having to do with the podcast. I think the truth is that it's almost like a marriage where 2 people just grew in different directions. And after a while, you're like, I think we're at different places right now. Like Legion of Skanks and the Creek, they don't belong together anymore. That's the truth of how I kind of feel about it. Like what we're doing is like a fucking, like a balls out, we will find funny in the most horrific, edgy, offensive things we can find funny in. And that is not the spirit of the people who hang out at the Creek anymore. That I've been doing comedy for about 13 years now, and it really changed. Me and you were talking briefly in the other room about this, but when I first started comedy, it was like the open micers at the time, the new comics, like the guys who didn't know what they were doing, were just figuring it out. The goal almost across the board, what was kind of hacky at that time, or what had been done over and over, was comedians trying to be really offensive. That was kind of what everybody tried to do, all of us included. And some people got better at it than others, and some people just kind of sucked at it, you know? But, like, that was the goal. In a way, I really feel like you were almost like one of the last people to come out of that old school. Like, you're like, well, what is comedy? What are we supposed to be doing here? And you'd be like, I don't know, we're talking about the most fucked up things in our head and trying to make them funny. You know, talking about how I don't know, I jerked off after eating a sandwich, or, you know, like whatever, like all your jokes are about, like things like that, you know, whatever it is.
Just
whatever.
your whole act, whatever garbage you're talking about.
Whatever bullshit it is. I think it's all jerking off and eating sandwiches, right? Am I talking about your act? That is your life. So, I mean, I don't know. Is it? But you know what I mean? Like, you were one of the last guys that came out of that, and somewhere it turned, and it kind of like creeped along, but then all of a sudden you look around and you're like, oh, there's none of that anymore. In the open mic comedy community, there's none of that. And it, now it's really dominated by woke PC comedy. And when it was the other thing, the open micers looked at Legion of Skanks as heroes. I mean, we were like, oh my God, this is like these three funny comedians who do the most offensive shit, and they fucking hit big and found this audience. That's it. But the woke open micers do not look at us that way. They look at us as very problematic, to use their language. And it was just more and more of a sense, and it all kind of culminated with this Milo thing. But ultimately, the three of us just decided that this was the time to end our relationship with the Creek and the Cave. And you know, to me, it is kind of sad because I really do, I do think to some degree the Creek, from my perspective at least. Look, I'm sure my perspective is somewhat flawed, as anytime, if like I use the analogy as this was a marriage and we're getting a divorce, anytime if you're getting a divorce, right, if you only talk to one of the people involved in the divorce, their perspective is going to be a little bit skewed. Like, you know, there's three perspectives, like her side, your side, and the truth, right? Like, so I don't know. But from my perspective, it's like we didn't really change. We kind of stayed the same, and the environment changed. And from my perspective, it's kind of sad. Like, the Creek lost a little bit of the thing that made it special. You know, it went from to me at least, it went from being a place where there were these people who like were doing very different styles of comedy, and a lot of talented people who were like hanging out there. And the Creek almost became a place where perennial open micers hang out. Like, it's not like, oh, this guy was an open micer 5 years ago and now it has like TV credits. It's like, oh, this guy was an open micer 5 years ago and is an open micer still today, and is basically still doing the exact same thing. And it's just, and then it's like, I don't know. I don't want to be in an environment where we're like getting judged by these other guys and stuff. But I remember back in the day, when Mike Brancatelli used to be the co-host of this show, he would complain about this a lot. The woke open mic crowd, where you'd go into an open mic and there'd be like feminist comedians running it and would give you shit for, like, you know, making a problematic joke. Like, I don't know how much you've come across this in your day.
Yeah, it sucks. I don't really do a lot of open mic anymore, but that's in part because I'm just like, oh, they don't want to hear these jokes. Yeah. Like, I just know a lot of the jokes I'm working on, I'd rather get up in front of a real audience that will laugh at it, whereas I just know if I go to the open mic, they don't want to hear this. Yeah. They hate anything. You know what's funny? Like, it's just funny in comedy to be adversarial, men towards women, women towards men. It goes both ways. Like, if you're a chick and you're like, oh, I fucking hate this dude, or the slutty, I just want his cock up my ass. That kind of shit just makes for humor. But for some reason, when you're a dude making those style jokes, women just don't like it. Yeah. Especially in the open mic.
I gotta say, I hate that whole culture. Yeah. It really bothers me. It's one of the things we've talked more and more about on this show. It's like, I really hate the woke PC culture in general. And that's, why would I wanna, you get to a certain point, especially when you have a show that is a real commodity, like that is a really valuable thing. You're like, okay, hundreds of thousands of people are listening to every episode of this, you know? Like, we have a commodity here. This is valuable. Why would I want to bring that into an environment where you're surrounded by this thing that I hate? And I really do hate it. Look, I've talked about this for years on the show, but one of the reasons why, around 2-3 years ago on this show, we kind of made a pivot. Like, if you listen to the beginning of Part of the Problem, it's almost all purely about statism versus libertarianism. Like, that was the show. It was like government and why laws are wrong and immoral, and like what governments have done to people and that. And I started a few years ago, like really focusing on cultural issues a lot more. And it's because like I realized that there's a good name. There's a real totalitarianism that comes along with this woke PC culture that isn't coming from the state. This isn't a politician or a law, but it's every bit as much, or maybe not every bit as much, but it also is oppressive, and it also kind of like the conclusion that I came to ultimately was that libertarians can never win if you can't say unpopular things. If you're in an environment where everybody's scared to say something unpopular because there are these punishments for saying unpopular things, then radicals like us are never going to be able to win the day through fucking conversation the way we had always kind of hoped we would be able to, right? Because if you realize, like, okay, we live under this system, this fucking evil system, it's like, well, what are the options here? There's like, how could you get to a more libertarian world? Well, I mean, one option is like a bloody civil war, and the other option is like you convince people. And obviously, one of those is much more preferable to than the other, right? So you're like, I'd rather just convince people. But if everybody's afraid to say anything except the standard dogma that's handed down to you from the left, from the biggest statists amongst us, that's not going to go very well. And I came to the conclusion that if you ever want to live in a libertarian world, in any type of like libertarian social order, you need a culture that supports liberty. And there is nothing that is more anti-liberty than this social justice warrior culture. And there's a reason why all the people who are social justice warriors are also socialists, right? Like down to the person. There's not a single one. There's no social justice warrior who's who's for government getting out of healthcare. I don't think, maybe there's not none, but basically there's none.
It's nice though. And do you remember? Do you see Jim Jeffries' bit about gun control?
Yes, loved it.
Hilarious bit. I couldn't disagree with it more.
Yes,
but
funny as funny.
Funny as funny. And I will tell you, that was some of the best social commentary I've ever seen, even though I don't agree with one bit of his take. That was humor at its best. He took a social issue, he had a stance on it, and it's funny as fuck.
The two jokes that I always use as examples of something that I completely disagree with but still love the joke is Jim Jeffries' gun control bit. Because it's just funny.
Yeah.
It's like funny as its own force. And that part where he goes, he was like, people are always like, you can't change the Second Amendment. Can't change the Second Amendment. It's an amendment. Like, that's just such a funny line.
Yeah.
I like the way he sets it up is great. And the other one I always use is Nate Bargatze's evolution joke.
Right.
Which, I'm a believer in evolution. But Nate does that joke where he's like, it's so funny. And Nate goes, he's like, they say we share 99% of our DNA with monkeys. He's like, really? Is that true? We're 99% monkey? He goes, I didn't even know that was true, but if that's true, then I just found out that other 1% is my favorite percent of my DNA. He goes, if I ever had DNA surgery, I'd be like, please don't touch my non-monkey DNA. I really need that DNA. And like, he says this whole bit on it, and it's just so funny. And it's like, whether you agree with it or not, this is just funny. It's hilarious, like a hilarious comment. And it doesn't matter that you agree with it or not. So yes, we have an impulse toward liberty, not an impulse toward controlling others.
Right.
And that's why you're allowed to laugh at jokes that you don't necessarily agree with.
But here's what's nice, is that for the most part, all this woke comedy shit, it's not funny.
That is our one saving grace.
How far are these? I mean, some of them go. I don't think it's going to last forever. They're only going to, like, dude, I have some jokes. None of the setup isn't, hey, I'm a libertarian. The punchline's not, oh, that's why government should be. But it's the point of view, and it gets fucking laughs.
Yeah, well, that's the idea. I mean, look, I don't think even on Libertas, I mean, the special is called Libertas, but most of my jokes are not like, hey, I'm a libertarian.
Yeah.
This is why we need to live in a libertarian world. It's just pointing out absurdities of the world. Obviously, it's from my perspective, which it is my perspective, but like that's what comedy is supposed to be. Anyway,
this happened Saturday night. I think you might appreciate it, but at LOL, which I don't think has a diversity problem. If anything, sometimes I'm the only white guy in the show, and I'm like, can there please be one other guy telling jokes? Just one other guy, so that like I'm not the one breaking in the crowd. But anyways, That's most nights there. Some other white comic was there, and he left, and I'm standing outside, and he walks over to me. He wanted a pat on the back because he goes, there's this chick hanging out, and there was no chicks up all night, so I told him, I was like, if there ends up being a guest spot, I'm not even going to do it. You should do it. There shouldn't be a night of comedy here without one female on the show. And I'm just like, yeah, I don't care. Like, just go do time if there's time available.
I also I find that whole thing so weird too, how you're supposed to get on board with the anti-male
just
like energy. It's like you realize like we're two dudes talking, right?
Yeah.
Like, none of them are listening right now.
Right. There's
like,
there's no chick here to impress. Like who are we lying to?
I've always said it really blows my mind how white men can get on board with the social justice.
You really thought I was
going to
give him a pat on the back, like, "Oh man, maybe I should give up my spot too." I didn't even realize that.
And of course, it always comes from that angle where it's like it's not that anybody who takes on that mantle is ever just going like, "Hey man, I'm a piece of shit. Like I fucking suck, dude. Sorry." It's always like, "Hey, white men do suck, but I'm the good one. Like cuz I'm the one who recognizes this." See? So you still end up being good.
Yeah.
Like there's still this virtue signaling involved. Like it's still like, but I'm the good one. See, because I did this. So I recognize it. Therefore, I'm kind of the good one. But that to me is just, it's what an awful world it must be to exist as as a straight white man who wants to be in that crowd. Just must be a goddamn nightmare. Anyway, so it just things changed over at the Creek, and it's like I think all three of us felt it, and we're like, this just isn't the right fit for us. And then the whole Milo thing happened, and it almost served as a good, as an opportunity to be like, okay, well, this is kind of, look, we didn't decide to make this like a situation where battle lines are being drawn, but that's what happened. Whether we made the decision or not, that is what happened. And battle lines were drawn, and it seemed to me like Rebecca made her choice. I mean, that's, which, by the way, I get that Rebecca was put in a really shitty situation. But just to be clear, Rebecca was not put in a shitty situation by us. So I can only feel so bad about it. You know what I mean? Like, we didn't decide, like, oh, we're gonna fucking use threats and intimidation against you. None of us did that. What we did was just kind of go like, well, we want to exercise the freedom we have of our podcast to book someone who we think will be a really great show. And by the way, it was a really great show. We were right. It was a really great show that's got fucking killing it on the numbers. When all is said and done, it'll probably be one of the biggest shows we've ever done. So it's like, yeah, so we did a move that was right for us, right for our audience, right for our business, and that's it. Like, that's something we have a right to do. We can't operate anywhere where we don't have a right to do that, or we don't have the freedom to do that, I should say. And I do understand Rebecca was in a really tough position because of all of these people who threatened her, and Rebecca was on the wrong side of an angry mob, and that's a bad place to be. But look, she put out a letter talking about how the whole thing went, and I gotta say, I found it very offensive, and it was like, well, if this is your take, then we probably can't be in business together. Here, I'll quickly we'll read the statement that Rebecca put out, if you guys want to pull that up, and we'll kind of break it down. Okay, so Rebecca says, the Creek in the Cave exists to support artists. I was unaware of who Milo was until late Thursday. When I found out who he was and that their plan was to have him at the Creek, I asked the producers to move their recording to a new location. A decision was made that the Creek is an unfit location for this guest. I mean, technically true, but there's kind of a lie by omission in there, which is that Rebecca said she didn't want the show there. We were like, well, we're having it there. She said, fine. She agreed to it, and then Milo decided to pull out. So it's kind of misrepresenting what happened, but I do understand. You have to... This letter starts to make a lot more sense if you realize that this is, this is your response to an angry mob with pitchforks outside your door. It's not your honest take on the situation. But regardless of that, Rebecca was put in a very difficult situation, and then this letter put us in a very difficult situation. That's really the way I look at it. So anyway, she says, a commitment of this community venue to the right of free speech includes and celebrates our rights to curate the best and most interesting voices according to my opinion and taste as the owner, and also to decline to give time to the worst voices, the bombastically hateful, the bitterly unfunny, the hacky, and the predictably bigoted. Well, I mean, again, look, the problem with that is that it's all in the eye of the beholder, because to be honest, I think the Creek has a whole lot of all of those things going on. And of course, hatred for straight white men isn't considered fucking prejudice anymore today. But, from if you do consider it, then there's certainly no problem having hacks and bigots. All right, let's pull up. I can get it. Upon unfortunately being forced to learn who Milo Yiannopoulos is, we have concluded that he falls somewhere in those latter categories. Milo Yiannopoulos certainly does have a right to free speech, and I also have a right to say not here, not for my audience, not for my community. Well, I'm not disagreeing with any of that, but I do think that it's a pretty difficult situation to put us in when we invite a guest onto our show and then the owner of the venue publicly trashes the guest who did nothing to you, didn't say anything to you, didn't say anything bad, and now you are publicly coming out and trashing a guy who we just invited onto our show, who, by the way, was a great sport, came on and did a really entertaining podcast. Why do I have to be in a situation where I am pandering to people who would never listen to me to begin with? I mean, really, get down to it. Like, I may not have gotten as popular, and I may not be as flamboyant, but I'm every bit as offensive as Milo is if these people want to fucking hate Milo. And the people who hate him were calling us Nazis as well. So why the fuck would I pander to that group of people? Why would you want to have Skanks located at a place that would come out and just throw your guest under the fucking the bus like that? And anyway, all right, let's keep playing. People who don't know me and some that do have said terrible things about me, have threatened my livelihood and the livelihoods of the people who work at the Creek, some of whom have been here longer than I have. My goal is to protect their jobs and the people that work here and the community that artists have built here. So I get that. That being said, I will not accept being threatened, held hostage, or spoken for, as I have been by parties on many sides of this argument. Well, I gotta say, this is the thing, right? To me, it's pretty clear that there's two sides of this this argument. One side is us, and we're saying, hey, we make the Creek money. We have a fucking show here. We contribute to the Creek. We've always supported the Creek. We've done festivals at the Creek. I've run my hour at the Creek. I've had sellout crowds there. We've done a live show there every single week. We give them a ton of advertising on our live show, which, by the way, is not cheap. And for free. We give this to them. So, now, by the way, I'm not saying the Creek has given us a space and they've helped us too. It's a mutually beneficial relationship. But let's get real. We've done a lot for the Creek. And we wanted to have a guest on our show who we think is going to be a really hilarious and was a hilarious guest, and it'll be good for our podcast. The other side is threatening to assault people, boycott the Creek, and ended up vandalizing the property. Those are the two sides. So to just say, oh, it's like both sides are threatening me. No, not really. It's really only one side that was threatening. All right, let's go back to the letter. Legion of Skanks podcast. Legion of Skanks is a podcast that sets out to be the most offensive podcast on the planet. They have said many things that I do not condone or find funny. They have had guests on in the past that I have had to ban. When I don't like what's being said, I leave the room. When I don't like the people in my venue, I ask them to leave. I don't censor the comedians I work with, nor do I screen bookings or guests ahead of time. It would be a terrible, terrible thing if I did. Big J. Okerson, Louis J. Gomez, and Dave Smith are comedians. They are not Nazis. So I got to say, that's the paragraph that really bothered me. And after reading that, I just thought to myself, there's no way we're going to be able to continue working with the Creek. And I didn't want to say anything after I read it. You know, it's when you're a part of something that's a team and there's 3 people involved, you got to, you know, you can't just unilaterally make decisions. When we've always worked under the idea that with Legion of Skanks, it's not a democracy. It's like we have to be unanimous. Like if 2 out of 3 of us want to do something and the other one doesn't, then we don't do it. You know what I mean? Like it's like we're all going to be in this together if we do it. So I wanted to make sure I talked to Lewis and Jay and that they were on the same page as me, and they were. But as soon as I read that, I was like, yeah, I don't think I can get past that. And I understand that to some degree Rebecca wrote this in duress. You know, I understand that this was like not the easiest situation that she was in. But I think, Rob, you'd understand after reading that. It's just kind of like, yeah, then you're just not the right place for Legion of Skanks. I mean, that's like, come on, man. That's outrageous. That your take as the owner isn't like, this is a fucking hilarious show. Like, I'm proud of how great this podcast is. They can take the most offensive shit and make it hilarious. The idea that they're Nazis is absurd. She just goes like, yeah, look, a lot of what they do is horrible. A lot of it's not funny. Sometimes I have to leave the room myself. Sometimes I cry afterward. Sometimes I think I've witnessed pure evil. But they're not Nazis.
Yeah.
That's your defense of us, that we're not Nazis? That's it? And not even like, this is a ridiculous, absurd, like, there's nothing more. I've never heard anything crazier in my life than the idea that these guys are Nazis. Just statement of fact. By the way, they're not members of the National Socialist German Workers' Party of the late 30s and early 40s, in case there was any confusion there. Because I could see where you would think they were, but they're not. It's like, are they offensive? Yes. Are they horrible people? Absolutely. Do I have to cover my ears and close my eyes half the time I watch the show? Yes. Do they have the blood of 6 million Jews on their hands? Probably not. That's my take away. It's hard to read that and not go like, you know, I think maybe we're not right for each other. It is almost like, you know, you ever see those marriages where people just hate each other? And you're like, what the hell are you guys doing together? You hate each other, right? Like, why would you even be in a marriage anymore? It's almost like after reading that paragraph, I was like, well, then why would we even be in business together? I mean, if this is what you think of us, then like, why would we be here? Anyway, we don't need to read the rest of the letter. That was just kind of the part that I wanted to get to. But so, so we'll be taking off onward and upward. I wish Rebecca nothing but the best. I hope that place does really well. And, you know, if this is, they can, you know, replace Legion of Skanks with some fucking, I don't know, feminist fucking, you know, goddamn, some like, this is what it's like to be a queer person of color podcast. It'll be hilarious, I'm sure. Anyway. So that's that. Tonight's our last night there. We're going to go have a great time. We're going to have fun. We'll celebrate the time that we've been there. I really don't mean this to come off at all like I'm shitting on Rebecca. I love Rebecca, and I've always had a good relationship with her. And, you know, it's just time to move on. So that's that. Because there was another big story that caught my eye this week that I really thought I was like, wow, this is really kind of incredible. And we have to talk about this. And this was the Daily Beast doxing the person who created the Nancy Pelosi doctored video. So do you remember, did you catch this news of the doctored video?
Trump himself put it out.
Well, Trump, I guess, retweeted it or something like that.
Did he retweet this, or did he just retweet a different video that was the mashup of when she was legitimately stuttering?
I think
I seem to recall that he tweeted a mashup of her kind of stuttering, and then this video, which, by the way, it's not a crazy doctoring. It's not, you know what I mean? It's not like he slowed it down a little bit, and she seems drunk, but it's not like, I don't know, it's not like a video doctored of aliens landing or her saying the N-word.
Well, I believe this is the video. The guy made the video.
Okay.
And that Trump at some point, it got posted on these different, like, you know, message boards and kind of like, you know, like Facebook sites or, you know, Facebook groups or whatever. And somehow it made its way to Trump. And as Trump likes to, you know, kind of retweet things like this, he retweeted it. It's one of these things, though, where it it's hard to see. Like, I don't know what the intent of this video was. If it was like, oh, we're going to trick people into thinking Nancy Pelosi's drunk and losing her mind, or it was just hilarious, because it is objectively hilarious. We're going to play it in a second. But Trump retweeting it or something like that. Like, I think a lot of what Trump does, there's no way he doesn't do this. Like, everyone knows this by now. Like, he trolls. Donald Trump trolls. This is a big thing that he does. And a lot of what he does is he'll put something up. Do you remember when Donald Trump he retweeted the video of Donald Trump? It was him from the WWE, and he was like wrestling, and they put CNN over Vince McMahon, I believe's head, and showed him like body slamming CNN, and CNN got furious, and they were like, this is a call to violence against journalists. And you were like, this is a fucking WWF video with CNN on their head. And it's almost like your outrage reveals something about yourself. Like, really? You're the news media, and this is what you're outraged about? Like, we're in the longest wars in American history. We're $20+ trillion in debt. We have an opioid crisis that's like killing 70,000 a year. But this is where you get really outraged, is over a fucking stupid video. Like, there's something about that is truly sickening. And to me, this had that feeling to it as well. So Donald Trump retweeted it. If you haven't, by the way, we were looking for this video. I was like, oh, let's pull up this video. And our guys had to do some work to find this. They've done a pretty good job of scrubbing this off pretty much any like traditional site. But where we go to Reddit to get it?
Surprisingly, the one place that hasn't taken it down is Twitter.
Oh, so Twitter still had it up. Hilarious. But I know we went to like a lot of different sites that didn't have it. It had been scrubbed off there. But yeah, I guess Twitter hasn't been able to get it down yet. So there we go. Anyway, so this is the video that went out. It's hilarious and the most harmless thing ever. But let's play it.
We had took a little longer on the floor. Custody of the border. Everyone, they started sending signals, the U.S., Mexico, Canada. If that's not the accurate character, some people call it after NAFTA, some call it NAFTA 2.0, working together to make past that. Not if we're the fact. There are three things. There are three things. There are three things. There are three things. We're very busy people.
Okay, last time I checked, this is 3, not this. It was worse yesterday. We played another clip. She could not put a subject with a predicate.
Okay, so we don't need to play this part of it. So anyway, so I guess this video, I guess it ran on Fox News as well. I don't know. But so the video was, I don't even know what they mean when they say it was doctored. It seems like it was cut up. But okay, it shows Nancy Pelosi stumbling a little bit on her words, and they're kind of making fun of her. It's like, anyway, just seems to me to be utterly harmless. But so the Daily Beast, which is just, garbage.
So, by the way, I'm a little confused now because that was the video I saw at first, but then I watched, I think on CNN, they were doing a breakdown of what had been doctored, and I don't feel like it was that or it was only a chunk of that, but the doctoring was, that's all legitimate stuttering. He lowered her voice, like octave, I think is the proper word, and he slowed it down, so it seems like she's stumbling more than she actually is.
Oh, okay.
But it's not a flake. I'm telling you, it's not like. Do you remember earlier this year when they accused Trump of doctoring a video, which they did when like that guy tried to grab the mic from the chick? Do you remember that?
Yes.
But the doctoring was minuscule. Like they did, which was weird, but it didn't do anything. And like they had these like special effects experts trying to tell you that this is the change and that's the effect that it's supposed to have on you, and this is why it's propaganda. It's like, yeah, it was dumb that they did it, but I'm also watching it, and I'm not really seeing the impact in any way. This was very similar, where they said he had lowered it and made it, like, slowed it down, and there's a bit of an impact, but it's not like he put stutters where there were no stutters kind of thing.
Right. So, whatever it was, isn't it as simple as saying this is just meaningless and irrelevant? It's, it kind of reminds me of this story. And it's not quite as egregious, but it reminds me of my feeling during the Covington Catholic school kids story, right? So essentially what happened with those Covington kids was this should be a non-story. Like this shouldn't be something that we talk about at all. There's no need to spend time on this. Even if it happened, the way that the mainstream media said it happened. Like, let's say some high school kids were a dick to a Native American. It's like, why would that be a national story?
Right.
Why would that? Do you know how many times, every single day, all across towns in America today, there are high school kids behaving badly? It's like, oh, you were a fucking dick to some older guy, like, have some respect. It's actually probably a little bit of a problem in the country. That, like, I do think it's a major problem in our society that we don't have more respect for elders. But that's maybe a bigger question. But one instance of some kid not having respect for some older guy, it's like, okay, why would this even be a story? And then the other way, the way the story actually was, a bunch of black nationalists yelling, or black Israelites harassing a group of kids, and then a Native American beating a drum while they did cheers. There's nothing about this in any way that this should be a story. However, when the mainstream media decides to all in lockstep try to ruin these kids' lives over it and got it completely wrong, then you're like, well, now this is a story.
Well, they were trying to establish that that this is evidence of a trend of how racist Middle America is.
Yes, and Trump supporters, Christians, white guys,
and it's
all
such a plague that it's stretched all the way to kids, and that's why we should be aware of just how rampant this is.
So they all jumped in and they got it completely wrong.
Yeah.
Completely wrong. And in the process of trying to establish the narrative that you just laid out very well, they really did some damage to some kids' lives and didn't even care about it. I mean, they actively tried to get these kids suspended from school. And not just that, but, like, you know, you have to be somewhat aware of the environment you live in. This is kind of like when I was talking about with the stuff with Milo being on the creek. And, you know, what is, even in the libertarian sense, right, when we really talk about aggression, and we're very concerned with defining what is actually an act of aggression and what is not, right? Like, what is, you know, it's like, when they hate speech is aggression or something like that. But it's like, if you actually say, like, what is, you know, it can be very nuanced sometimes, and it has to be like a threat of aggression. It has to be kind of dealt with. You have to have some type of reasonable standard. So, like, if some guy, you know, some huge guy is, like, begging for money from some woman in a dark street, she's walking down the street, and he's like, could you spare some change, ma'am? And she's like, no, sorry, I can't. You know, that's like, okay, that's not like a threat. He's just asking for money. But if some huge guy, you know, starts punching his hand and, like, walks up to her menacing and is like, can you spare some money? I think it's in your best interest if you spare some money. You might go like, well, that was a threat. Now, technically, it's hard to very technically say what he did. It's just, there's nuance to it, right? Like, this was a threat. We can all agree that was a threat, that second one, right? Like, so I'm just saying, in today's environment, to just put these kids' faces all over the internet, knowing, and you're saying this is the face of hate in America today. That's an actual quote, or an actual headline. That one, I forget which news organization ran that, but this is the face of hate. This guy, here's his face. And you're putting a teenager's face out there. It's getting pretty close, you know, to being, this is like the thing where with Milo, when you just start calling Milo a Nazi, and then you go, the Legion of Skanks, our Nazi sympathizers, are hosting this Nazi, and then you tag Antifa into it, you're like, man, you guys are walking right up to that line of what is straight up a threat. Like, you're straight up threatening violence on somebody, you know? Oh, hashtag Antifa, do you know where the closest milkshake place is to the creek? Like, I mean, I'm not going to say straight up that's like violence. I never want to be the, like, speech is violence crowd, but that is pretty damn close to inciting an assault on somebody. The irony that they're the ones who are always, you know, saying everybody else's speech is violence. But anyway, so that's just kind of, it's like you and they know what they're doing in this situation. So once again, back to this story. This Nancy Pelosi video absolutely never should have even been a story. There's no reason why any of us should be talking about this at all. It's utterly meaningless. But after this Daily Beast article, now all of a sudden it's worth talking about because of the way the media's handled it.
Yeah, well, now the new narrative is this is proof of just how rampant fake news is and how easy it is to create fake news, and that's why we need censorship of media, and either for government to get involved or there to be a better effort from companies like Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube and everything to ensure that what's going up is not fake. Now, I don't even know if you can really put this into the category of fake news.
Yeah.
I don't know, I don't know that this necessarily fits the Russian bot fake news. I don't know if this fits that, but now they're in full-scale panic mode of this is proof of exactly what's going to change.
Look, there's another element to this, too, which has become a real problem over the last few years, and that's the element of doxing. And doxing is releasing somebody's personal information. So doxing could be releasing somebody's name, address, phone number, place of employment, things like this. And what happens is, and this has been true throughout history, that almost all authoritarian governments rely on foot soldiers to carry out some of their dirty work. So what's happening now is that people in the corporate press know that there are these Antifa types on the ground who will go out and fuck. So they know if your fucking, if your information is released and you're assigned the label of, Nazi or racist or Trump supporter, which are all just one and the same today anyway, that there's going to be a lot of people who will now call up your employer all day long, try to get you fired, show up at your doorstep, like all this different stuff. I mean, so they know this is happening, and this is now a weapon that they use against people. Like this is, by the way, it ties back to what I was saying before about the open micer woke PC crowd and what I hate about them so much. Like when you were talking about not going to open mics because you're like, you know what? Like these guys don't even want to hear what I have to say. I'm going to be saying like fucked up, offensive jokes, and it's not even worth it. It's like it really hurts me. Like it hurts me to hear that because. And I understand where a lot of people out there wouldn't particularly care, but I'm a fucking stand-up comedian, and it's something that I care about. Like, I love freedom of expression and free speech, and I love funny comedy, and you're a funny guy, and the idea that, like, you can't go work out your joke. It's just like, if a fucking open mic comedy show in New York City isn't a place where you can say whatever the fuck you want to, where is?
Yeah, maybe I just lost my balls.
Yeah, maybe. Listen, I was going to bring that up later, but we'll talk about that off air. But you know what I'm saying? Like, if you can't say whatever the fuck you want to in that environment, I mean, what the hell is the point of all this? But a lot of what this is targeted to do, and it's effective. Look, like, there's been several times that there's been something I wanted to tweet a little bit more aggressive than what I actually end up tweeting. Because, believe me, there's been times where I want to call someone a faggot or I want to call someone, and I just won't do it because it's like, I don't know, I got like 40,000 followers and I don't really want to lose that right now. I still got to build up my audience a bit before I can afford to just be fucking a murderer and get kicked off all this shit, like, or at least that's how I feel, and maybe that's just me losing my balls, But it has this effect. If it has that effect on me, it's having that effect on a lot of people where you're a little bit worried to say something. And I feel like I almost have an obligation to say something about this because there's also a lot of people out there who aren't in the position I'm in, where I could say whatever the fuck I want to and I'm not going to lose my job. You know what I mean? There's a lot of people out there who this comes out about them, they lose their job, and that's like, you're in a lot of trouble. This is how you support your family. And so it's just part of this by design is to intimidate other people out of saying what they would normally say or taking the stand that they would. And you see examples of this. I mean, I got to say, it's like, especially now looking back at it, but the thing that Owen Benjamin first, like, got fucking lost his, like, agent and managers over when he was standing up about transgender children. Like, that is a really great, that's a great, like, litmus test for how far will you be pushed to just go along with the group and not stand up for what is obviously right? Obviously right. Hey, we are going to start abusing children in the name of social justice. We're going to straight up start giving 5-year-old kids, 6-year-old kids hormone blockers to permanently have permanently do damage to their body. But essentially, in the vast majority of the cases, sterilize them. I mean, if you're a boy and you start taking hormone blockers, you start taking estrogen.
Come out like Michael Jackson. You're gonna forget mixed gender, mixed races.
Yeah, who the hell knows?
The whole thing gets fucked up.
I'm not sure it does that, but regardless, it's like but you know what I'm saying? Like, this is an obvious. every one of us knows that is fucking wrong, man. That is wrong to do that. But you're like, this is going to be a risky opinion to take. So will you put up with that? And if you're willing to put up with that, man, you're not going to stand up for just about anything, you know? So anyway, this is how it works. They kind of push people toward like making you feel afraid to stand up against the group and say what's right. And by the way, the only important right things to say are the ones that stand up against the group. It's the only important things to say. Like, there are lots of things that are right that you can say, but if the vast majority of people agree with you, then they're completely meaningless. Doesn't mean anything. I could say, I'm against slavery. It's like, okay, that's morally correct, but what does it mean that I say that? Nothing. It means nothing. Tom Woods made this point in his book. It's one of the most brilliant things I've ever read in my life. Or Tom Woods wrote in Real Descent. It was a really great book. I highly recommend it. But he basically said, and, you know, I'll butcher this, but what he said was, he goes, if you say that you're against slavery in 2019, it is utterly meaningless. It means nothing. We're all against slavery. And it's abolished since 1860. It's not coming, 1865. It's not coming back anytime soon. You know what I mean? It's like, it literally, you might as well just fucking shout out gibberish. It's that meaningless to say I'm against slavery in 2019. However, if you were against slavery in 1840, that really meant something. Like, you were risking your life. You were risking, like, the abolitionist party controlled like 2% of the vote. There were regular lynchings of abolitionists. That's like a ballsy position to take. That means something. So the only things that really matter are what positions you're willing to take that are ballsy positions that are important and are you know, morally right. And so he goes like, now what, anybody who you know out there who's just taking the easiest position, the thing that's getting them popular approval, they're just going, oh, hey, by the way, I'm against racism, so everybody can say, oh, wow, you're so brave. That guy who you talked about who goes, I just wanted to make sure there was a woman on the show. You know, that guy? Yeah. Anybody who's just saying the easy thing to get approval, what you can guarantee they would not have done is be against slavery in 1840. You know that person, just by their very makeup, did not have the balls to actually... So how you measure yourself, like truly your virtue or nobility, is what issue of morality are you willing to stand up for that 99% of people will disagree with you on? What issue that you're actually willing to fucking bring some, like, pain onto yourself for taking? Are you willing to stand up for? That's an actual measure of fucking virtue, if you want a virtue signal. But none of these fucking people really care about that. But anyway, the point of all this shit is to scare the fuck out of any... Look, what this person was guilty of, making this video, was embarrassing Nancy Pelosi. They embarrassed somebody in a powerful position. A very powerful position, by the way. She's the fucking Speaker of the House. What is she, third in line to be president? Right? She's a very powerful position. And they made her look foolish. They made fun of her. They were laughing at her. Just like Milo. That's something that really pisses off authoritarians. You're not allowed to fucking make fun of them. That makes everybody else more confident to fucking not look at them the same way. There's also something where it's hard to look at someone the same way after they're embarrassed. You know? Like, there's just something about that.
Also, you know, this is kind of wild. If you look at how many times the media gives an unfavorable edit to people who don't share the same point of view as them, especially you see them writing a lot.
Oh, listen.
So if all of a sudden we're going to take the viewpoint that that's propaganda or fake news, what the fuck does the media do? Let's go by that standard. I'll play that game with you.
Well, the one that pops into my mind, which was one of the most outrageous things I've ever seen. Do you remember the one with George Zimmerman?
Oh, he's the...
So George Zimmerman was the guy who killed Trayvon Martin.
Right.
He got let off.
I get it. I like candy.
Yeah, well, the whole conversation was over Skittles. It was like, that's a very unhealthy snack, young man. And then the guy flipped out. No, well, he went to trial in Florida. He was found not guilty on grounds of self-defense.
And then like 2 weeks later, he saved a lady, and then 3 weeks later, he did something shitty again.
Yeah, then he always does something good, then something shitty to get back in the news. But look, none of us know exactly what happened in the situation, but if you watch the trial, I remember watching a bunch of it. They aired it on CNN, and it was clear that there was reasonable doubt. You know, what happened was he was a neighborhood watch guy. He was following around this black teenager. He called the cops. Ended up getting out of his car and approaching him. They had a lot of break-ins in the area, so he thought he said on the call to the cops that the kid was like looking in people's windows. He ended up confronting him We don't know exactly what happened. They got into a fight. George Zimmerman was getting the shit beat out of him, or at least he got roughed up in the fight. A broken nose, laceration on the back of his head. He was on his back, which is what the forensics determined. He was on his back on the ground, and he had a gun on him, and he pulled out the gun and shot Trayvon Martin in the chest, and it ended up killing him. Anyway, NBC News played his 911 call, and the way the call played on the news was it went they asked for a description of the kid, and he said,
"So black,
yeah,
dangerously black, not even one of the lighter black ones."
This is the real aggressive black. So what he said was something along the lines of he was like, he's got a backpack, blue jeans, whatever. He's got, so and so haircut. Pause. He's black. That was the way they played it on their news. In reality, what happened was he said, he's got blue jeans, blah, blah, whatever. The operator goes, is he white or black? And he goes, he's black, in response to their question. But they just left that out to leave the impression that he was going, pause, he's black. That is, now NBC News said they did the editing for time.
Yeah.
To fit it in for time. It's like, now come on, man. That is, to me, you're like, that is like, and this is an issue where you have, the country was like very divided over this issue. And it's like, you guys are like playing around with inciting racial tensions. So to see those same news media people who never apologize for that freaking out about this, it's pretty rich to think that they get to be offended over a doctored video when the video is showing Nancy Pelosi stuttering and clearing her throat. Like, who the fuck cares? There's nothing that this isn't at all the equivalent to that. Like, not only are there racial tensions and a fucking, you're playing around with a country that's very divided, but also there's a man going to trial here. Like, there's a murder trial going on that you could be influencing. There's none of that in this situation. It doesn't matter at all. Anyway, there was a clip that I wanted to pull up where they discuss this. So if you're not, so the Daily Beast, Kevin Poulsen,
the doxing
is the guy who tracked down the
seemingly with the help of Facebook, though.
No.
Not
seemingly. With the help of Facebook.
Yes, that's fucked up of Facebook.
This is a big part of the story.
That's really fucked up of Facebook.
Well, listen, they if you want to get a good take on what's going on with the media, if you want to actually have like a fair, reasoned, like, critical view of how good a job the media is doing, you have to go to our favorite little piggy, Brian Stelter, who's on the case. Don't worry. He's always on the case.
Reliable sources.
Here we go. Reliable sources over at CNN.
This is a video that was a hoax that reached up to the highest levels of power, with Rudy Giuliani himself pushing it out. And so there's a lot of speculation about who might or might not be behind this. And so Kevin Poulsen was able to track down the kind of network of fake news sites that were pushing this, and then the person that first uploaded the video.
And what we learned from the story is that there's a profit motive here, that you can put up a lot of these videos on Facebook, you can make a quick buck. Didn't this guy say he made $1,000?
Yeah, I mean, but look, that's not... It might have been a lot of money to him, but I don't think it was a pure profit motive. I think for him it was a matter of ideology. It was, he's a big Trump supporter. And, one of the most interesting things about this story to me was that, you don't need some sophisticated operation in order to publish fake news or publish a hoax that'll grab the country's attention.
It doesn't take a Russian bot farm. It's just one person with video editing software tricking people.
Yeah, exactly. And I thought that was the real key to the story, and the reason.
And the people saying that you shouldn't have named him because he's a private citizen, I'm seeing a lot of people on Twitter saying you all were irresponsible for outing him.
Yeah, I don't think that's accurate. First of all, I think he outed himself, by attaching his name to several fake news sites that then pushed the video. Okay. And then he spoke to our reporter at length and on the record for an hour and a half. And then we also withheld some information that he didn't want out there that he felt would impinge on his privacy. So I am glad that these people want to protect the privacy of this man, but I think our actions in this case were right on the money.
Yeah, right on the money. Right on the money. Now let's just be clear about this, right? There was absolutely no reason to reveal the identity of this guy There's nothing about it that contributes to news. You can't call it news. I mean, look, this was it had already been widely reported that this video was doctored, that this video was fake. That's the news, if you want to say something about that, right? The fact that it happened or that people can put up videos and doctor them, as if everybody didn't know that already, you could maybe argue that that's news. But releasing the guy's name well after it's already been reported that this video is doctored, what about that is news? Why would anyone need to know that? Who would benefit from that information? No, that is simply to out somebody, to punish them for making fun of someone in power. And the idea that they would be like, oh my God, they fucking, this went all the way to the highest halls of power. It's like it got retweeted by Donald Trump. That's it. Got retweeted. The guy, by the way, who they fucking, who they doxed is a fucking... It turns out he's a day laborer. He's a black dude from the Bronx who's on probation. So but for all this talk that I've always heard from the left about
a really
punching
authentic black
down,
guy too.
Yeah. Oh yeah. They're the best kind. Oh, but I mean Trump supporters, so not that authentic. But
right.
But for all this
Mixed
talk about
signals.
like punching down and privilege and all of this, you're talking about a day laborer making fun of the Speaker of the House. I mean, he was doing the right thing, right? He was punching up. That's right. But they're very happy to reveal that guy's information and quite possibly take a guy who's, got a record, is pretty vulnerable. And who knows what's going to end up happening to him over this? Who knows how many people on the ground now are going to be calling his place of employment and all that shit. So, anyway, this was clearly a hit job. It's pretty obviously a politically motivated hit job. And it just kind of, I don't know. It really leaves you kind of seeing, it's like Donald Trump has said many times that the media is the enemy of the people. I know this is something I've repeated, something Michael Malice says a lot, that the corporate press is the enemy of the people. But man, like if you need any more evidence of it, it's like they really will just go after people. Regular people, for what? The crime of making a funny video, or worst case scenario, misleading people to think Nancy Pelosi was stuttering more than she was. And then they link it to like, oh, it doesn't take a Russian bot farm anymore. It could just be one person. Yes. Way to really understand the world around you, Brian Stelter. That's right. People can post crazy shit online. Did you just figure that out? Is that, I mean, this is next level, really. It's actually like, it's wrong. It's fucking evil. You're revealing somebody's information. You're trying to like go after them. They revealed his place of employment, his criminal history, his name. Like, I mean, it's like, they're like, oh, well, we kept something. What'd you keep? His address? Well, thank you. That's so nice of you. Really is. I don't know. To me, I think this is outrageous. And of course, Brian Stelter could never just call the media, the guy who's supposed to be the media watchdog. Instead of your question which is just a setup to give them a platform to say, no, we did the right thing. So if you just wanted to, let me just show this, right? Here's how simple it is. If I have Brian Stelter's job, here's the you don't have to be me. Like, you don't have to get up there and go, you guys are the fucking enemy of the American people. Like, you guys are all a bunch of liars. You guys have gotten us into fucking 6 wars. What the hell did this guy ever do? Okay, fine. You don't have to be me. If fake news is a problem, then how about when you guys said Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction? If fake news is a problem, should you guys be thrown in jail? How about Trump being a fucking asset of the Russians? Whatever happened with that one? Who's really the fake news here? Okay, fine. You don't have to be me. But if you just wanted to do your job, like you're a professional, you're not a fucking, comedian like me, like you're a professional news guy, right? Just look at the 2 different ways you could ask this question. So here's what Brian Stelter asked. He went, I'm seeing a lot of people on Twitter, and a lot of people on Twitter are saying, you should have protected his privacy. You didn't need to reveal this guy's name. What do you say to that? That's what Brian Stelter says, right? Here's the other way to just ask this question, very simply. What benefit was it to know what his name was? What was the benefit of revealing that? That's it. Ask that simple of a question. Because guess what? There's no answer to that. They have absolutely no answer to that. There's no what would your answer to that be? It's like, oh, I don't know. We needed to know what some poor black dude in the Bronx's name was who put up a fake video. He was a big Trump supporter, so we need his name. It's like, I'm sorry. There's just fucking there's no way to defend this. All right, let me just see. Blah, 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 whatever else. Yeah, so the whole Daily Beast seems to be proud of this. The Daily Beast editor-in-chief, Noah Shatman, was tweeting about how proud they are that they found the guy behind the viral, quote, drunk Pelosi video. It really is fucking something. That's the guy who went on reliable sources. Anyway, it's gotten a bunch of Twitter outrage, and I think it's well deserved. It's to me just absolutely crazy that they would just be fucking reveal. It's like, you guys know what you're doing when you dox somebody. You know what you're doing when you reveal people's information. You know that you're dealing with like a black dude in the Bronx who's probably surrounded by people who aren't Trump supporters, and now you'll just release his information and like let that shit be known. I'll tell you what, dealing with the whole Milo thing on Legion of Skanks, it was like it was the first time I ever really got a taste of that personally, when people started tagging me and then tagging Antifa New York in it. And it's like, oh, I mean, I know what you're trying to do here. You're trying to get me into a fucking physical altercation here. I mean, that's what it is. You're basically like, okay, well, you're in a very left-wing scene. You're in New York City, and these Antifa guys are here. Fucking Owen Benjamin texted me when that whole Milo thing was going on. Me and him were texting back and forth. And he fucking texted me, like, usually, you know, a text from Owen will be something, you know, usually something hilarious. And then something like, you know, like, never back down, fuck these pussies, or something like that. And Owen texted me more just a concerned thing. And he was like, listen, dude, just so you know, this New York Antifa guys are no joke. He was like, I watched them like beat a man to within an inch of his life at a Night for Freedom in New York when they picked on that old guy and like beat the shit out of him. He was like, you know, they're pussies and they'll just like attack one guy if he's off to the side in a herd. But like, don't fucking underestimate what these guys will try to do. Like, they fucking, it's like, they will never like fucking rumble 6 on 6. But if you walk to the fucking bus stop up the road and there's 6 of them on you, they'll fucking beat you within an inch of your life. That's who you're dealing with. So it's like, when you see other comedians like tag those guys in a tweet of yours, it's like, and now I'm supposed to see this comedian out somewhere and just be like, hey, how's it going, bro? Hey, we had a disagreement. Like, this has now gone beyond just a political disagreement. And this is the shit that, like, the fucking mainstream media, they know exactly what they're doing with this stuff. Anyway, all right. My fucking shoulder's killing me. Let's, we're going to get out of here soon. We're going to cut this one a few minutes short. But before we do, it's time for this week's Crazy Bitch Watch.
Hey, y'all crazy bitch. I want to clear up some stuff because, you know, there's a lot of criticism that's said about you. So I want to give you the opportunity to speak on these things. The Native American thing. Do you regret taking the DNA test?
Look, I can't go back, but...
You know, you got to explain to a lot of people that don't know. Now, you came out and said that you were Native American. And,
long ago.
And they found out that you weren't. And people were very upset about that.
This ain't for the people who don't know.
No, but a lot of people don't
have that much time.
Because we're putting people up to her as well, so go ahead.
So, I grew up in Oklahoma. I learned about my family the same way most people learn about their family. From my mama and my daddy and my aunts and my uncles. And it's what I believe. But I'm not a person of color. I'm not a citizen of a tribe. And I shouldn't have done it.
If you had a chance to do it over, would you?
I can't go back, you know, but I shouldn't. But what I can do is try to be a good partner. And that's what I do every day. So, for example, in the things we're talking about here, what I want to see us do in education is I want to see us get rid of the student loan debt and make an investment in the historically black colleges and universities. I want to see us in housing, hit redlining head on. I've got the first housing proposal to just smack straight into that. I want to see us in healthcare, address healthcare disparities, and particularly maternal mortality rates for black women. we got serious problems.
I see you talk about reparations as well.
Yeah.
So what, your family told you were Native American?
Whatever free stuff you need.
Charlamagne tells me I'm Dominican, but I don't believe him.
You are. How long did you hold on to that? Because there was some report that said you were a Native American on your Texas bar license and that you said you were a Native American on some documents when you were a professor at Harvard. Like, why'd you do that?
So it's what I believe. You know, that's, like I said, it's what I learned from my family.
When did you find out you weren't?
Well, you know, I'm not a person of color. I'm not a citizen of a tribe. And tribal citizenship is an important distinction and not something I am. So.
Were there any benefits to that?
No. Boston Globe did a full investigation. It never affected, nothing about my family ever affected any job I ever got.
She didn't get a discount in college? No.
You kind of like the original Rachel Dolezal a little bit. Rachel Dolezal was a white woman pretending to be black.
No, this is what I learned from my family.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, what about...
God bless Charlamagne. Oh, he's fucking great. What a sad state of affairs where Charlamagne will grill her harder than anybody else will on her way to running for president. That is a fact right there, by the way. She will not get treatment like that in any other venue. But I really give that whole crew a lot of credit because it was amazing. First off, Elizabeth Warren's answer was so painful.
It makes no sense.
Oh my! So first they go, do you regret that?
Daddy.
By the way, if you ever go, if someone says to you, do you regret that? And your answer is, I can't go back in time. You are already a bullshit artist.
Yeah.
I mean, that is such a bullshit artist response to that. It's like, hey, do you regret something? You go, I can't go back in time. It's like, oh, I'm sorry. Did you misunderstand my question? Did you think I asked you if you had cracked the code to time travel? It's like, no, when I asked the question, I was operating under the belief that you do not have a time machine. That's what that was my, that was what I came to this with. That was my preconception before we started talking. Assuming you don't, that's not the question. The question is, do you regret it? In other words, the question is, if you did have a time machine, would you not do that? That's more the question you're asking. She goes, well, I can't go back. But, I'm not a person of color. I don't have tribal membership. Me neither. I'm also not a person of color and also don't have tribal membership. But that's not the question either. Why do you regret saying you're a Native American? Okay. And then she just instantly, this is like the lefty fucking mindset. She just instantly pivots into, but I'm an ally because I'll give you all this free stuff. I'll give you this. I'll give you health care. I'll give you housing. I'll give you jobs. What do you want? Reparations? I'll give you that. I'll just give you all these other people's money. So there. Are we cool now? And I just love that response. Like, so when you said you were a Native American, like they're just like, nah, sorry, lady. We're going right back to this initial claim. She will never get past this. Elizabeth Warren's presidency has been DOA ever since this whole thing came out. And oof, God, it was beautiful and cringe-inducing all at the same time. I gotta say, I love it. What do you think about Elizabeth Warren's shot?
Oh, she's got no chance, man.
Absolutely no chance. No question about it.
She actually looked pretty good there, though, for her. Usually
Robbie
she looks
Bernstein
terrible.
trying to smash that Native American. Oh, there's something really funny about like older white lady sitting down with these like black guys or Hispanic, whatever the other ones are. Just sitting there with these like minorities and being like, now, I'm not a person of color. It's like, yeah, we all know. Anyone just looking at a fucking freeze frame right now knows you're not the person of color in the room.
And I'm not.
She is the whitest lady ever.
But I learned that. I learned it.
But I can be a good ally. That's all. A good partner. That's all I can be every day. All right, Elizabeth. You're this week's crazy bitch. All right. That's it for today's show. We will be back on Wednesday with a brand new episode. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Go follow Robbie Bernstein on Twitter @RunYourMouth. Follow Robbie Bernstein @Robbie the Fire and listen to Run Your Mouth, Robbie Bernstein's podcast. Hilarious show. Make sure you go check it out. All right, guys. We will be at the Free State Project at PorkFest. Only a few weeks away. Come check us out. All right. Peace.